Welcome to our webinar on preparing your final report. We realize this report isn't due for a little while now, but I also know that some groups have been finishing up their projects a little bit ahead of schedule. And so we wanted to provide an opportunity for you to dig in if that's where you are at your point in the grant. Before we go too far down this road, want to introduce you to Amelia Oliver, who's going to be co-presenting with me today, talking about some aspects of the final report. She's actually going to be doing more on the grants moving forward with the projects that started with forest improvement and then the grants that we have right now for urban forest management. But she's on staff with us, and I will just give her a quick chance to say hi.
Hi, everyone. It's Amelia. This is my voice. And I'm the one that actually cuts the checks that go to you, so I'm kind of important. So
which forces me, good or bad, to be nice to her the vast majority of the time, which, sometimes is a struggle, but I do it for you. So I want you to know that. And then the other is Mariela Ruacho. She is on staff as well. She's the one that makes sure that this webinar runs smoothly and succinctly, and she'll give you a couple of logistic pointers for the next hour.
Hey everyone, so if you have any questions, please type them in. You are all muted. So as we have, as the time period for questions comes in, we'll be able to see your questions, read them out loud to everyone, and answer them. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we're going to just advance. Hopefully I'm doing this right. Oh, so far off to a bad start. Try again. There we go. Okay, so our partners, Colleen Ravden with Urban Ecos, based out of Seattle. She has been the one for the last couple of years that has been calculating all your GHG reductions whenever she has mapping questions regarding the trees that you planted. She's been there to assist with that as well. Some of you she's provided even greater technical assistance in terms of species selection or how to map your trees. She has been an invaluable partner, and she will be talking to you about what you'll need to be doing in the final report with respect to your tree mapping and tree count. And though they're not joining us today, the Green Lining Institute has been another tremendous partner with us. They've been part of the review of grant applications as they've come in, helped develop the guidelines and application, helped us with the true social equity component of the grant, and we have definitely taken into consideration and integrated some of the things that we know they would want to see at a final report moving forward. So I just wanted to acknowledge them as another critical partner in this program, which we've had now for a couple of years. So what you need to know about the final report and the template that I sent to you is that this is a comprehensive examination of the project in total. For most of you, you've been working on this project now for almost 3 years. As some of you, maybe it's only been a couple of years, but I believe the first projects went out in 2016, and so there's a lot of data to capture here. And the other thing that I just wanted to highlight is that, again, we know this report isn't due till, I believe, right after Labor Day weekend, but we want to give everyone a chance to spend the time that we feel they may need in putting this report together, both the quantitative and qualitative data. And I do want to stress here, and we'll say it again at the end of the webinar, that the final payment is rendered only after the report's completion. So even though everyone has a quarterly report and quarterly reimbursement request and progress report due July 10th, those funds will not be reimbursed until after the final report has been completed and approved by California Relief. That does not mean you have to wait till September 3rd to submit your report. If you're anxious to receive your funds, you can start on the report July 1st if your project is going up through June 30th, or you can start on it now if it's already been completed. But I did want to stress that point. Moving on. So some important dates to remember. As we just mentioned, your final quarterly report is due July 10th. Prior to that, the project closed June 30th. This means all expenditures must be made, all trees in the ground, all education materials paid for, all aspects of the grant, all personnel costs, everything needs to be completed by June 30th. I've talked to all of you individually from the 2016 grants about where you are in your budget. We've made budget change proposals based on your needs, so everything should be lined up for the 2016 grantees to close June 30th. For those of you who are on here For the projects that continue on past June 30th, I believe your close date is November 24th, but we'll have a separate reminder webinar for you as we get closer to that date. Thank you for joining us today. The final reimbursement request due, same time as the quarterly report, no changes there, same as always. Again, final grant report, September 3rd, I believe it's right after Labor Day weekend, and we've already discussed the final payment made after the final report's approved. So some important dates to keep in mind as we close these projects out. So what we're discussing today, the final report breaks down into several pieces, and those pieces collectively will represent both the comprehensive quantitative and qualitative data from your project. And we're going to go over those piece by piece. As you know from the webinars we've done in the past regarding reporting, we've tried to make these templates and documents as user-friendly as possible, while at the same time fulfilling our obligation to CAL FIRE and the California Air Resources Board. So we think that with this final report, we found the happy middle ground there, and nonetheless, we want to provide an opportunity for you to ask a lot of questions, both here and after offline, if so desired, but also walk you through fairly comprehensively what we're looking for in each of these pieces that will be discussed. So we're going to start with the quantitative data. And probably the overarching thing that I can say about the quantitative data is that you should already have this information. You've been reporting on these projects now for a couple of years. Each quarter, we've been asking these same questions with the exception of total jobs created. But all these other questions have been answered either in the match that you put forward in your quarterly reimbursements or on the progress reports. This should all be material that is available at your fingertips regarding the trees that were planted and other plants. You can go to your progress reports and add that up. If you've got your MVCA sheets, obviously this is going to match to what you've put in there in terms of total quantity of plants and trees. Again, volunteers, they're often been captured on progress reports and the volunteer hours as well. So this is really just looking at what you've reported already and compiling it in the final report. Now, as you all know, I did provide a template to you earlier this week, and hopefully you can see that all this information is captured on the 3-page template that we sent out. A couple of things I'm going to want to highlight here. The very first and most obvious is sign the document. Is that sometimes on the invoices that have come in, we've overlooked the fact that a document hasn't been had a wet signature attached to it, and for expedience purposes, we've gone ahead and processed the report. We're really not in a position to do this, so 2 copies of your final report will be hard mailed to us via snail mail, and make sure that both of those copies have the signature of the appropriate person at the organization that's overseeing the project. So you see that's circled item number 1. I'm actually going to let Colleen chime in here briefly on the other item that I have circled on page 1 regarding trees planted and replaced trees. Colleen?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So Chuck and I have gone back and forth about how to describe, how to calculate this final number. And so I thought maybe if we just talk it through, it'd be a little bit clear. What we're trying to figure out, basically, bluntly said, is how many trees are alive at the end of the project. So the first in that box, just above the red circle one, it says the total number of trees planted. And so let's say in your proposal, you proposed to plant 1,000 trees. And then you went out and you actually planted 1,100, you planted 1,100 because 100 died. So the number that goes in the total number of trees planted is 1,100. And the number of trees needing replacement, or the number, how many trees needed replacing is 100. And so we'll subtract those two and discover that there are 1,000 trees alive at the end of the project. Where you're might run into trouble is, let's say you committed to planting 1,000 trees, 100 died, and only 50 got replaced. So then you planted 1,050. The number needed replacing was actually 100, the same 100 died. And now we're going to see that the total number of trees remaining at the end of the grant is 950. So just because I think that is a little bit hard to understand, the total number of trees planted includes all of the original trees and then any trees that you planted as replacements. And then the one that's circled, how many trees needed replacing, is really a question of how many died during the course of the project. And of course, if you committed to planting 1,000, actually planted 1,100, and none died, then that's even extra better, of course. And I'll just, when we get to my part of this where we talk about the spreadsheet, what I would like is for the number of trees on the spreadsheet to match the difference between these two numbers. So again, like if you planted 1,100 trees because 100 died, you'd put 1,100 in the first box, you'd put 100 as the trees needing replacing, and then there should be 1,000 trees on your spreadsheet. Those would be only the trees that are alive, not the ones that died and that had been replaced. So I'll come back to that. But that was this is where the numbers should line up.
Thanks, Colleen. And we're not going to go over in explicit detail every question on this box. I will say that, you know, down from there, you'll see we ask for you to describe the maintenance plan for all grant-funded trees for the next 3 years. As you know, part of the grant agreement ensures or requires that you maintain these trees or a partner maintain these trees for 3 years after the grant period ends. So your grant period actually ends June 30th, which means we want to know from you how these trees are going to be maintained for the next 3 years starting July 1st. And of course, this should have been captured in the proposal that you forwarded to us a couple of years ago. If that plan is still in place, then you know it can be a cut and paste. If that has changed or has been augmented in some way, we'll want to see that reflected here. I know that a couple of grantees that I've talked to very recently had let me know that at the time they submitted an application, they could not get the city on board or the school district on board to maintain the trees after the grant cycle. But since then, now that they've been planted, the city or the school district have come to appreciate the trees and committed to that maintenance. So that's going to be captured in there. The other more qualitative pieces in here, they may work into other elements of your final report going forward, but we want to make sure they're captured. Describing the primary roles volunteers played in your project. One new piece of information here that I don't think is going to be too taxing is jobs created and jobs retained. And what we're looking for here is that some of these grants, you know, were several $1,000s, you know, up to $60,000, $70,000. I know at least a couple of grantees used the funds to actually bring someone on, either part-time or full-time. And that's what we're looking for. So what was the job creation component of this? I know several grantees did workforce stipends to high school students, even though that may have been only on a part-time basis. That's the kind of detail that we're looking for. That's becoming more prevalent in the discussion about the expenditure of cap and trade funds, especially with the Air Resources Board and with those programs where job creation should be a significant component or has the capacity to be a significant component, with urban forestry being one of those. If you have any questions, you're welcome to contact me on that, but this is one where we're just looking to see within your organization, was there a staffer who, you know, would not have been able to stay on had this grant not come through for the organization, or like I said, were the people that you brought on because of it. Similarly, on the second page here, we're talking about co-benefits. I'm not asking you to quantify co-benefits here where calculations are put into place, such as air quality improvement, stormwater runoff. I should be able to work with Colleen to get that information just based on the trees that you planted. But some of these other pieces here that are a bit more qualitative, if you can just flesh out in the box provided the co-benefits related to either policies improved or publications, public health, that would be great. And of course, there may be other things that we haven't caught here. The final thing on this page, which relates to the quantitative data that we're looking for, which is all captured in these 2 pages, is the census tract information. And here, over the course of the last couple of years, when we asked folks to list the census tract numbers in which work was completed, I got a variety of answers where grantees would say, here's where we planted, here's where we planted, and these trees are going to benefit this census tract. We planted in a non-DAC census tract, but the people that planted are residents of a DAC or a low-income community, and we listed those. So you'll see, just for purposes of clarification, I've kind of broken those out into individual questions, and there may be some overlap. But I think first, what we're looking for, given that all of these projects had to be located in or benefiting disadvantaged communities is where were all the trees planted. And this is all of them. So you can absolutely, we'll want you to indicate whether or not the census tract you're listing was DAC or not. But we do want to know where all the trees that you were involved with in the planting that you've listed on your MDCA sheets, where they were planted census tract wise. And of course, this should match up to your MDCA sheets that you provided to us that I submit to claim. Then going down, you'll see I've circled a couple other things. This is where we want you to differentiate. So listing the census tracts of staff and stipend-based personnel supported by the funds that lived in a DAC. So reinforcing the workforce development component, and then the census tract where the benefits could reasonably be attained by census tracts, which is really about a half mile. I think by CARB definition, they see trees being of benefit to a community that's located a half mile away. So you should try to use that as your gauge of communities benefiting from it, unless there's additional benefits such as floodwater management or stormwater control that you could actually point to and quantify. But we're not asking that of you unless it's directly pertinent. We're going to now move on. So this is the new piece of the grant, and this is probably what we're most interested in. The quantitative data, absolutely, we need to provide that to their resources board and CAL FIRE. They need to make sure that these funds were being used for the purposes that they were awarded, and that was primarily planting trees and environmental education around climate change and around urban forestry. What's really going to sell the project is how you tell your story, and that is where we're looking for a narrative. And you'll see we've offered some guiding questions to help with that narrative. But this is the piece that I think we're going to use to share with people in your, with decision makers from your district, from your community, from people at the Capitol, from CAL FIRE, highlighting in social media. Some of you may have seen some of the case studies that were provided early on in the discussion around Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund Awards by Greenlining Institute. They did a publication that highlighted some statewide projects from in Oakland and Los Angeles and in the Inland Empire. Those are what the stories that we want to hear. We want to know what the challenges that you faced, how this project is going to affect future urban forestry efforts, the stewards that were created as a consequence, how did it improve the community. You do not need to contain your narrative to solely the questions that we're asking here. We simply wanted to provide you a starting point on how to weave your tale. For those of you that did progress reports that were fairly robust in your narrative, a lot of this may be pulled directly from that. If not, this is your chance to kind of exercise your creative writing skills and just tell the story from your perspective. It doesn't have to be fancy. It should be truthful. It should be how you see the project being a benefit to the community and the outcomes that came from this. I think I'll give Amelia just a chance to chime in here as well in case I missed anything.
No, what we really want are, like you said, things that we can pull up that make your project different from the other ones. We're going to be compiling some of these into kind of case studies, and so if we can really get an idea of your story from beginning to end and the benefit it had, that's our goal in these reports.
And I guess maybe just an example that immediately comes to mind for me is that we have a grantee in the Inland Empire who planted trees along Route 66 in various areas of various cities around the Inland Empire, starting in San Bernardino County. And just on paper, if you just said, yeah, we planted 350 trees here, and here along highways for either noise mitigation or air pollution, GHG reductions, it doesn't really tell the underlying story of that project, which says that this was a Veterans Memorial Highway, and this project very much centered around recognition of veterans that have served throughout the years, and how the story is woven into these tree plantings really is where the meat of the project is. And so that's just one brief example of how we're looking for a little more depth beyond just, yeah, we planted trees here. And then you'll see here that we included a note that, quotes from partners and stakeholders, those are really valuable, whether you want to do pull out sidebars or side stories from partners and stakeholders. Some of the progress reports that I've seen over the last couple of years are great in terms of incorporating comments that were made either by decision makers or for-profit partners or members of city council who maybe saw their eyes open through the project that was being done in their area. So, you know, capturing that to the extent possible, I think will be really valuable. Okay, and you'll see that on page 3 of the template we provided, we've provided all this information for you. You know, letting you know, these are the questions that we want to see answered. This should not be construed as an exhaustive list of questions. You should certainly put more information in as you see fit. You can see that in terms of the page demand, we're not asking for much. For those that feel like they can tell their story within a couple of pages, that would be great. If you want to expand beyond that, that's great too. But again, anecdotes from specific planning events, quotes from volunteers, elected officials, and then you know, we need to ask you to send this to us both as an electronic copy and as a hard copy. I know that in the past couple folks have said, oh, you know, I mailed it, but I didn't have your address. So you can see here that I put the address so that we're very clear on where we want this to go. Just like the electronic copy is due September 3rd, we want to see the 2 hard copies with all attachments in the mail on or before September 3rd. And then you'll see also for your convenience, we've included a checklist which kind of summarizes what we've discussed here, but also what we've captured in the template and the 2 pages preceding this one. So I think with that, we're going to move into the next element of the final report, which is your final tree spreadsheet, which I'm going to turn over back to Colleen.
All right, I just had to unmute myself. So this is just a slightly simplified version of the one that you've been filling out quarter by quarter. I dropped off the columns that talked about the relation of trees to buildings because in this case, we won't need that anymore. We use that to calculate the greenhouse gas benefits, but here we just want to track the trees. So those columns are gone. And what I'm going to ask, and so first of all, normally I wouldn't put this many words on a slide because I think listening to people read their slides is dreadfully boring, but I wanted you to have this as a record of what seemed to me to be important here. So it's going to be a complete tally of all the trees that are alive at the time of the final report. So any trees that died in the process, we want to drop those out of here, and their replacements should definitely be included. And so as I said before, the total number of trees on this spreadsheet should equal the difference in the number of the trees that you entered on the first page of the progress report. So trees that are alive. The layout is the same as I said, so you can just copy and paste from the previous reports, but making sure that you get rid of the dead ones. So I had asked along the way for people to try to have unique tree numbers. That first column was intended to be a unique number that identified each tree as being distinct from another one. We haven't necessarily been doing a very good job of that. So I'm going to ask you to keep the tree numbers that you had in the previous quarter, even if they are not unique. So if in quarter 1 of 2018, you submitted 50 trees numbered 1 through 50, and then in the next quarter, the trees were also numbered 1 through 50. Let's just keep them that way. And then I'll use the tree number and the X and Y coordinates or the date planted to match them up if I need to. That way we can see, that will let us see which ones are missing. So if tree number 47 died in the first quarter, then I'll be able to see that tree number 47 is not on this list. And then the last thing here is in column L, I did add an extra one, which was to please identify if the tree was funded directly by Relief or if it was one of the trees that you submitted as a match tree, so that we can sort of keep those all separate. And most people have been doing that going along, so I hope that won't cause too much of a difficulty. So again, just cut and paste from the previous reports, just leaving out the trees that are dead, and then identifying, if necessary, which ones were funded by Relief and which ones were funded by match. And as always, also, feel free to send me an email if you have any questions. What we're really trying to get at here is we want to send to CAL FIRE a final list of all the trees that are alive at the end and know that what we've got at the end is an accurate representation of what's happened throughout all these quarters, because there's been a lot of weird, crazy things that happen from quarter to quarter. And I'm trying to sort of just get rid of all of those anomalies. I think that's it for me, Chuck. Unless anybody has questions for me, but I'll be here till the end. So.
Thanks, Colleen. And I think for those of you who may not be familiar with what we're talking about when we say match-funded trees, there are several grantees that let us know that they were able to bring additional trees to the equation, either at the beginning of the grant or thereafter. A grantee in Los Angeles received another grant for tree planting where the state was not going to calculate those benefits, and because her workforce was being partially funded by this grant, we were able to capture those. Another grantee in the Central Valley had the local utility kick in another 100 trees on top of the ones that were going to be planted. So that's just for, again, not everyone had matched trees, but I just wanted to provide that background. And I believe Amelia wants to chime in.
No, there was a question on that. Colleen, can you see the question?
Hang on one second.
I think there's an issue with the actual form that it's not allowing, it's making it a monetary entry instead of a number when you enter in your.
I think that may not be, I don't think that's the.
Yeah, that question's from the very beginning of the presentation.
Yeah,
so I think that was
that's
about the PDF.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I got you.
So,
all right.
For those of you who don't know, Amelia loves answering questions. So we're going to take them as they come. So a very valid question was raised for on the template that we provided to you, the PDF of the form where you're putting in trees that's coming up as a monetary result rather than a number. We will work to correct that and get out additional forms to you. Okay, thank you for the question. Seeing no other questions at this point, we're going to move on. And I think at this point, we're turning it over to Amelia to talk about the photos.
Well, this is kind of a staff issue. We kind of got together as a California staff and tried to figure out how we can show through photographs these projects. Historically, we get photos from people. Sometimes they come hard copy. Sometimes we get 200 pictures and we have to weed through them to pick the few that we like. So what we're doing is asking you as a grantee to take the opportunity to pick the best pictures that demonstrate your project. So we're asking for no more than 20 photos. I'm sure if you slipped in a couple either way, but we don't want to go through 150 pictures and find the best. We want you to find the ones that really reflect your project. When you name those photo files, if you could remove the spaces between the words in the file names. It does some weird stuff when you send them to us when they have spaces, and using the underscore as a way to avoid that to make it so it's easy to read, or you can just mush them all together, whatever system you want. If you could include in the file name some kind of abbreviation of your organization, maybe the name of the event, Arbor Day, or if you have some tricky way to code it. The date somehow, April 2019, and a distinguishing number. Now, for those of you who have, have a file manager, you can often do that by naming a first file, and then you can share that down. Mariola, just one moment, can maybe explain that? Mariola, can you explain that?
And just, I think we're also going to be clear in the subsequent slides that are coming, but some people have put files, have put pictures on JPEGs, they've embedded them in a PDF, they put them on Word documents, they put captions in the photo. Yeah. What we're looking for are just clean JPEGs, stuff that we can do as either social media with strong enough resolution that we can put it up on web, and I think Muriel is going to be here to describe a bit more of that as we go to this next slide.
Yes.
Hey, Marielle, can I just jump in with one quick thing? This is Colleen.
Yes.
Those requested file naming rules would be wonderful for my Excel spreadsheets too. I love it when I get an Excel file that actually has the name of the organization and the name of the quarter or final report or something in it like that, and then it's just, I'm so much less likely to get lost. So that would be awesome for everything. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Colleen.
Perfect. And then one of the ways that you guys can share the files with us, instead of sending us a whole compressed file, a zip file of it, you guys could upload them to a file on Google Drive. And then something that you can do, for instance, for this one, let me go back. For this one, I want to share the 2018 street trees photos. So I highlight the photo, click once, and then I click on the paperclip where you see the red arrow. And then once you do that, you go. Where am I?
Nope, go down.
You're going the wrong way.
Keep going down.
One more.
One more. And by the way, for those of you who saw on the previous page, Spanish phone slider, I don't know what that is either. I'm assuming it's a small version of a torta.
And then right here, you'll be able to see the link sharing on. So you could just click on the link and then copy that link and put it on your PDF report. And then if with a digital one, hyperlink it and just make sure you print the link for the ones you send on snail mail. So yeah, that's it. Any questions?
If you do have questions on this particular aspect of how you can share photos with us, Mariella is also here most of the time, and she'll be able to field questions if I'm not able to when you call in or when you write in on your questions.
Yep.
So thank you. All right, so we're actually coming to the end of this. We wanted to leave plenty of time for questions, but here are just some closing comments. Reiterating, the quantitative data is really what's needed for state agencies. These are the numbers, these are the pieces that we need to report back to CAL FIRE and the Resources Board so that the state has confidence that the money was well spent. But for California Relief, we have a lot of new partners to these grant programs. Most of you we have not worked with before, and it's been a real pleasure to get to see what other people are doing in communities around the state that we normally have not had a lot of presence. And that's what we want to see captured in the qualitative data, is telling the story of what's happening in that community. You're the ones on the ground doing the projects. You're the ones that have a story to tell. And we want to be able to share your story with decision makers at the Capitol, at state agencies and local agencies, so that the value of urban forest resonates through these projects and through what you've been able to do in building up the community and stewards for these projects. Quotes and photos are really integral in this effort. They really help share that story above and beyond just what you put in writing. So we try to provide some outlines for how you can capture the photos and really highlight what you think are the 20 images that, to paraphrase, tell 1,000 words or speak 1,000 words. And then, as always, as the grant program administrator, questions regarding this and other pieces, you can always call me. Again, for many of you, this final report is several months away. For some of you, I know you're going to be looking to complete it as soon as possible, and we want to continue to be a resource. So I think with that, I'm going to offer closing comments from Amelia first and then Kalaine.
It's Amelia. I don't really have any closing comments. I would say to give me a call if you do have questions on things before you submit them, so that when you're submitting, you're giving us a final document. It's much easier for us to clear through and check the boxes rather than trying to go back and forth at the time after you've submitted it. And the sooner we can get that approved, the sooner we can get you your final reimbursement check.
Thanks. And Kalaine?
I don't think I've got anything left here.
Okay.
You do have 2 questions in the question box, though.
Okay, so we're going to move on to questions. I will confess to everyone that my question box is amazingly truncated, so I have to kind of read them in this very odd format. I don't think Mariella wanted me to do that. I don't want to get in trouble with Mariella.
It's really.
Do you want me to read them out to you, Chuck?
Sure. Go ahead.
One's a question about Mariella's Google link drive, about about the actual letters that were in the link. I think the point Mariella was trying to make was that you have your own Google Drive, and this is just a way to share it with California Relief. So if you have a Google Drive, but Mariella can can make them more clear. But the question is the last letter in the Google Drive link a Y? But I think it's your own Google Drive you'd be using, right?
Mm-hmm. And the answer is no. You need to double click on the link and then copy it to make sure you get the full link. So just to clarify that. Thank you.
Okay, and then I see another question coming in from Southern California is if we turn in the final report before September 3rd, could it be possible that it would be approved and could the grantee be paid earlier? Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't do it like on July 3rd because I won't be here. But certainly if you turn it in prior to that, we will take the time as final reports come in to try to respond to them as quickly as possible. We know this is a unique document from the quarterly progress reports and reimbursement requests. Now, if you happen to turn it in during that period of July 10th through July 30th, I cannot guarantee it will be read during that period because we will be very focused on closing out 20 plus grants at that time. But anytime, either before then, June or August, yes, we will do our best. Thank you for the question. Okay, let's see. Here's something for the 2018 grantees. Will there be a separate webinar? We're going to do a follow-up webinar. So there's a few, just so the folks from 2016 know, we had a round of grants that went out the year after your grants were awarded. They have a similar deadline, but it's slightly extended. I believe the final reports are due November 24th, right before Thanksgiving, or perhaps right after. And then I think, I'm sorry, the projects have to close November 24th, and then I think the final reports are due, I think December 31st of this year. So yes, out of Santa Ana, there will be a follow-up webinar, but it will be largely comprised of the information that we've covered here, unless we learn from the final reports that are submitted here and the photos and the worksheets that we need to make significant tweaks to better streamline the process for the grantees or collect the data that we need to provide to CAL FIRE and the Air Resources Board. Okay, let's see. The question, I need to make some budget changes. What would the process be to do that? Give me a call and we'll go through it. If you've worked with us before, we actually try to be pretty, have a lot of latitude in budget changes. There are some areas where we can't exceed caps that have been put on, such as indirect costs and personnel, but we're generally pleased to work with you on that. Let's see, another question. The end date, will we have a separate, okay, so yeah, we will have a separate follow-up webinar. Can you please explain what you're looking for with the project map showing completed tree planting areas? Are you looking for just a map of the planting locations, or are you looking for a map with dots showing the locations of each tree? I think I'm going to let Colleen chime in on that and see if there's a preference there, Colleen.
No, I don't think at this point we would ask people to have a map showing the locations of their trees. I think I missed the part where we talked about project maps. From my perspective, I do not need a map with the dots showing the locations of the trees.
Okay, there you go. Thanks. So I think we're going to leave that up to the individual grantee on how they want to, present maps. It could be in a general area. If you did do, very contained tree planting in a single school, and you want to show where they're all planted, you're welcome to do that. So that's at your discretion. Is the only way to send photos, or can we do via Dropbox link or another file sharing method separate of email? And here comes Mariella to field that question.
Yes, so the reason why I did a Google Drive shareable link is because it's an open link so that we don't have to have restricted access to it. So for instance, we have Microsoft 365. So if you send us a Google link just to our email, we're not going to be able to open it. So that's why I want a shareable Google link. But if you could do a shareable Dropbox link, then that's fine. As long as I'm able to open it and I don't have to have any specific permission to open it and download the photos.
Thanks, Mariella. Okay, let's see. There's a checkbox that says project map showing completed tree planting areas. Do we not need to submit it? I think it's probably makes sense for you to show project maps with general outlines of where the tree planting areas were in there. But as Colleen just said, you know, kind of each dot representing each tree is not necessary. And then if you have further questions on that, you can contact me offline. So I know that was a follow-up question to one that Colleen had tried to answer. So certainly happy to talk to you more about that offline. Colleen, does it look like I covered all the questions?
That's everything I see, Chuck.
It's like getting tell.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll give everyone just a couple more seconds if you have something that you want to type in. If I was more astute with the audio, I could probably try to unmute people, but I think we're coming to the end. So I'll just do one more check for questions, and then we'll let everyone have, what, 20 minutes of their life back. So let's see. Google Box, thanks, Maps.
How tiny that is.
Okay, so I think we're done. Thank you everyone for joining us. This will be uploaded to our website if you need to reference any of the slides going forward. And of course, Amelia, Mariella, Colleen, and I are here as a resource for you. We look forward to seeing your final reports. And
Good work, everybody.
Everyone take care. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.